Well, howdy, friends, and welcome to the Roundup podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Tidwell. Super excited today about our guest, Scott Kindig. He is a great friend and has been a sweet mentor to me. And we're going to talk about what it means to rest as a college ministry leader. But before we do that today, quick hit, I want to talk to you about Roundup. It's going to be May the 11th through the 13th in Fort Worth, Texas. Really want you to be there. So take a second, find a team or for your student leaders, or even someone that would really enjoy the content that you can kind of spitball with while you're there. But we'd love to see you there. You can register at sbtexas.com/roundup. It's going to be a good time. So we'll see you there. But now, Scott, what's going on, brother?
Hey, man, it's a good world. The Braves won the World Series and University of Georgia won the national championship. We do that once every 41 years, so I'll be 97 when that happens again. So
hey, praise the Lord. I didn't put those two together. I forgot the Braves did win and your Bulldogs won. So yeah. I'm just hoping the Dallas Cowboys will draft some of your Bulldogs from the defense. So that's what I'm hoping for.
Me too. I get to root for all the teams now.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Scott, I remember probably, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, man, you drew a semicircle out talking about rhythms of rest, and it changed my life. And I'm just really thinking about restfulness. And I don't know about you, but I feel like as I see leaders from all across the state and even the nation doing college ministry, rest is really kind of hard to come by. We are just not wired for it. And when we have the time that we feel like to do it, we really don't know what to do with ourselves. It's kind of like writing with our left hand if you're right-handed. And so at least it's like that. It's like that for me. So I would love just to talk through one, who you are, what you do, and then really jump into, man, what is it? Kind of give us that theology of rest. Like what does that even mean, look like, and tangibly?
Yeah, I love that. Scott Kindig, been my history is 13 years as student pastor, 9 years youth ministry consultant for state of Georgia, then about an 11-year stint at being an executive pastor in a couple of different places where we're planting churches and we're really helping undercover college ministries around the country. Put discipleship pathways in place so that they could raise up leaders, so that we could create more opportunities for church plants on college campuses. And so, when you look at that arc, the reality is in all of those levels, I felt like there was a pressure for me to do more and better than any other student pastor in the country when that's where I was. Yeah. And then when I went to the state convention in Georgia and was, leading, they said there's 963,000 students, 11 to 18 in Georgia. Go get them. We have 3,600 partner churches, so just go get them. That's what you want. That's what we want you to do. Yeah. And so all of those really big goals that we set for ourselves that are, part of vision frames and mission statements and all those kinds of things are so worthy of being accomplished that we feel like, gosh, I've got to get there. I've got to do that right now. And man, it doesn't ever help when you're looking down the road and there's a church that has like more people than you do coming into your college ministry. Yeah. Or, the good thing about college life is, if you're inside of a church environment and you're not just, a ministry on the campus, you have the same rhythms of the college. And usually most people go home in the summer and in between Thanksgiving and Christmas, you get this break. And there are times where you have opportunities to have breaks. And I think we just don't see them. Yeah. They're there, but we just don't see them. And we sometimes have bosses that expect things that are beyond, hey, we would love to have 1,000 college students by maybe Wednesday of next week. Would that be awesome? Yeah. You've got 100, just get to 1,000 by next Wednesday night. And And so all those kinds of goals get thrown around because numbers and metrics matter to us. And when numbers and metrics matter to us, sometimes we get more income. So we start working harder and harder and harder. And, the reality in Psalm 127, it really says, hey, don't stay up with anxious toil. God is so in love with you that he wants you to have a better life. And gosh, I really think that so many people look at us in ministry and often see how tired we are instead of how energized we are about what is happening in the kingdom. And somewhere we have to, post pandemic, we have to figure out it's, we always use this phrase, but it's, you can do family and ministry. You can do family or ministry. That's a bad thing. If you're trying to do family and ministry, you're trying to do both things perfectly, and you're not going to do that. And then if you do family or ministry, you're choosing one to be more important than the other all of the time. And you're a toggle switch going back and forth. I need to get over there. I need to get over here. And then the real reality is it's not family and mission. It's not family or mission. It's family on mission. Yeah. And if we're going to be families, then the families that we have at home are just as significant to our ministry as the family that we're a part of in our church ministry. And we've got to start finding those gaps. And there's several things we can talk about today. There's ways to execute that. And I think we're going to jump into that in just a couple of minutes.
Totally. And I would say if you're listening today and you're on a podcast, or you're on Spotify, or you're on Apple, or whatever you're listening to podcasts, this is going to be a very visual podcast. And so if you're not watching, that's okay. But I would say jump over to our YouTube channel and we'll commentate as best we can, because Scott's got some things he's going to show us on a tear sheet to help us kind of see what it means to have rhythms of rest in college ministry. So go ahead and get going, Scott.
Yeah, I'll jump into it. So the theology behind it doesn't get past us as long as we read the first chapter of the Bible.
That's right. Yeah.
So Jesus starts loading us up, right there in chapter 1, and what the conversation is about is all the things that God made and that they were good. And so, but the way that they said it even reminds you the Eastern mind doesn't start the day when the sun comes up. They start the day when the sun goes down. Yeah. And we get to be people who go to sleep. Now, God never sleeps and he never slumbers, but we do. And he wants us to remember, hey, there's some reason where you lay down for 6 or 8 hours and go comatose, and it's because your body needs to rejuvenate itself for the next day and all the things that you want to do. And so when we see this over and over again, and for repetition, I'm just going to say it, is Genesis 1:4-5. God saw that it was good what he had created that day. There was evening and there was morning the first day. So what he's saying is there's evening and morning. So you're really you when you're being you. You're not always really you when you're doing what you're supposed to, what you feel like you're supposed to go do. Yeah. And so there's this challenge between being and doing that we fight with all the time. I want to be the best husband in the world. I know that I'm not, but I want to be that. But how do I do that? And so the do kind of displaces the be, if that makes sense. And if we get too close, we can be a crooner and we can be doobie-doobie-doo. But that's what happens, is we're fighting. Which one of those things are we? We could be Sinatra. In chapter 1, 8-10, it says it again. God saw that it was good. It was evening and morning, the second day. Couple, 12 and 13 verses later, evening and morning, third day. 18 and 19 verses, evening and morning, the fourth day, and then 21, 23, evening and more, the fifth day. So he staccato notes this to us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, because the last one is in verse 25, And God saw that it was good. God saw that it was very good. And there was evening and morning the sixth day. So all of that landed in us in the first chapter of the Bible to remind us that it is really difficult for us to work well if we haven't taken the time to rest well.
Yeah.
And so that's the first thing we would say about that is the next day is the seventh day. So what's the seventh day? Well, it's Sabbath. And so now God looks at all the people that he's made, and he's reminded them 6 times, hey, you really start being you when you're resting and you're being with me, you're being with your family, you're doing things you enjoy that give you life. And it's not just all work and toil because Jack's a dull boy. That's not what we want to do. That's not what we want to be. So the first command is to be fruitful and multiply. And so what he did before that commission was he said, listen, let's just take a whole day and let's rest from all of the work. And this is the way he says it, and just all the work that we've done. And so I was like, well, what kind of work have we done? Well, you know what happened on the sixth day? You know, God brought man and woman into the equation. And so on their first day, Adam and Eve on their first day, the second day was a day of, hey, you know what? Let's just go rest.
Yeah.
And God had that fatherly care for, you know what? You're going to accomplish some things in the world because I created this garden and I want you to tend it. I want you to have dominion over the creatures on the ground, on the birds in the air, and all the fish in the sea. Like we named all of the animals, which gives us authority over it. So what's happening is we're learning from rest, and for Adam and Eve, it's the first day, and God says, hey, you know what, y'all go ahead at sundown and just rest and play and enjoy. And man, that's going to rejuvenate you. And tomorrow we're just going to play in all the stuff that I've made for you. And so God loves you deeply, and he wants you to have the kind of life that your church members would look at and say, dang, I wish I had that life up there. I look at that college student and I see how much they love what they're doing because their leaders are showing them how to live this life. Because it's not just college ministry; it's all parts of ministry. But the reality of college ministry is college students they don't rest well either.
No, not at all.
Yeah. They're 100 miles an hour all the time, and so the key for us to think through and to live through this and to move through this in a really special way is to understand that fruitful living starts with rest. And then we wake up and the sun is up and we go and represent God in the rest of the world. So it's about relationship and responsibility. You have a father that loves you enough to say, rest. I'm begging you to rest. I'm giving you every opportunity that you can rest. You have a 40-hour-a-week job, and that's a lot of hours. And you've got several hours of the week still available for you to go have fun when you get home and energize yourself and love on your family and do the things that give life to you. And different things give life to different people. And so for me, like if I was to go out and mow my yard, and at the end of the day, I have mowed my yard and I can see that I have accomplished something, that actually is a restful activity for me.
Yeah,
I have headphones on. I'm worshiping in my mower, a 21-inch mower with over an acre of land. All that stuff is happening. But some things energize us. And so we're thinking about resting, not just as sleep, but we're thinking about resting also as what are the things that energize you so that you can go and work and toil and do things. So all three of those things kind of fit together. If we were to read this passage, I got this open here in chapter 2, verses 1-3, this is what God said in the second chapter of the Bible. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it, God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. And so in chapter 1, it's like look at what we've done. Yeah. And so he's including us in the naming of people as just a workspace that we were in, that we had authority for. And then in the second chapter, what he's saying is, listen, I'm dedicating a day of the week for you to set yourself aside. And so there's just a couple other quick passages that I want to give you that kind of reinforce this, so that you don't think it's just in the first part of the Bible.
Yeah.
In Exodus 3:4, Moses was called to be a great deliverer for Israel after 40 years of serving as a shepherd. He wasn't doing a whole lot except taking care of the shepherds. And God has this pattern. If you see, before somebody gets commissioned to do ministry, there's usually some sort of a sabbatical. There's some sort of a rest season. There's some sort of a famine that you're trying to get through. And that doesn't just stop with Moses as, one of the key leaders of the Old Testament. In 1 Kings 17 and 18, Elijah started his ministry declaring a drought. That's the first prophetic utterance that he had. It was, I'm gonna tell you that you're gonna have a 3-year drought, and I'm gonna confront Ahab to fight back pagan idols. And so he had this 3 years of waiting until he got to do what God was calling him to do. That pattern of waiting is resting. It's getting prepared. It's getting ready to go. And it doesn't just stop with a prophet. Now it starts to move forward with a king. So King David in 1 Samuel 16, he was anointed king 12 to 15 years before he was appointed to be the king. And so God gives people those moments. And then the stellar King of Kings, Matthew 4, Jesus was miraculously baptized, and he spent 40 days in the desert fasting, praying, and fighting Satan before starting his ministry. So for us, it's all over the Bible. But if you would saturate, after you listen to this, if you would saturate yourself in John chapter 15, this would be the last part of scripture, scripture overload for the day. But John 15, 1-8, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear even more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word that I've spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me, lost line, and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away like a branch and withers, and the branches are gathered and thrown in the fire to be burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. And sometimes it helps to have a graphic. It helps to have a picture to look at.
Yeah.
And Mitch, I know we've talked about this a lot, but I've put some of the content already on this page behind me, so that we could, for a minute or two, if I don't tear it to pieces, I'm going to stand back. Look at that beautiful bulldog head.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go, man.
Yeah. So I'll move that out of the way now. Yeah. So when you're thinking about Genesis 1 and God reiterating over and over again, it's evening and morning, the first day. Your day starts with rest. It doesn't start with work.
Yeah.
And so what we want to look here is in John 15, you rest, and this is a covenant kind of a thing, right? So what we look at when we're thinking about this, we'll talk about this a little bit more in just a minute, but when God says he wants you to rest, he wants you actually to declare that I need rest, and God never needs rest.
Yeah.
So when I'm asleep, the world's not falling apart because I'm not taking care of everything. You know, we've got to get it out of our minds that God needs us. God doesn't need us. God wants us, and he wants us to be kingdom people. So the way he tells us to do that is when you rest, and again, we're not just talking about sleep. We're talking about when my Apple phone tells me, hey, you need to think about your day right now. You know, you need to step away and you need to just have a moment to yourself. And when Jesus is talking to us in John 15, 1-8, what he's saying is, I want you to abide in me. I don't want you to work for me. I want you to abide in me. I want you to be with me so that you and I can be on the same page, so that the design that I had for you, you can understand about yourself. I want you to be self-aware. I want you to know who you are. I want you to rest in who I am. And I want you to live with me. I want you to dwell with me. I dwell in you as a believer, but I want you to abide with me as Jesus, as the best good news ever. You get to spend time with Jesus.
Yeah.
And what he wants you to do is he wants you to be a human being. He doesn't necessarily call you into a life that is dictated by a super long task list. We all have super long task lists, but we need to make sure that in order for us to have the energy to be who he's called us to be, because our doing always comes from our being.
Yeah.
And that's why when you have a relationship with Jesus, when you step into a relationship with Jesus, it's not a contract, it's a covenant. It's a real thing. It's all about relationship. Over here, what we're trying to do is make sure that a relationship with God is preeminent to a life lived for God.
Yeah.
Now, this will lead to that. But what we think, especially in our American context, is if we get it done, we're going to have all of this over here eventually at some point. And then I get worn out by thinking about, man, I really need to rest. Man, I really need to spend some time with Jesus. I need people who know me and love me, help me reinforce who God's designed me to be.
Yeah.
And then in covenant, I just want people to know when things are bad, that relationship with Jesus and with God that we have, and the Holy Spirit indwells in us, this relationship is what keeps you together through all negative experiences, all pandemics, all bad seasons, bad days, cancer, diagnoses. All of these things are what sustains you. So we don't want to take the sustainable part of your life away so that you can be more on this side of the equation. And that works. So Mitch, as you're looking at this, does this make sense? And I know we've talked through this several times, but if there's something that you see that I'm missing.
No, that's good. And if you're listening, you're not watching. Basically, what Scott is drawing is a pendulum, and on one side's rest, the other side's work. And the point being that we rest before we work. But no, that looks great, Scott. I mean, I'm even thinking. I was talking to my wife this morning. We have 2 kids now and ministry, and now she's stay-at-home mom, and so I feel like even as a dad, there's a lot of pressure on me to work. Got to work to get things done to provide for my family. And I know even in sometimes that morning time of just being with Jesus, it's really, for me, it's like, I know that's necessary, and so let me do this and move on to the next checkbox. And that's pretty commonplace for, I think, most leaders, but of really, that rest piece, that covenant piece of I'm in a relationship with Jesus. And as much as we say that we know that, we still kind of operate as if, okay, now I got to go work for him so I can get rest at a later point. And it's like, it's still just a very comforting and a restful truth to know that, no, he never leaves me. He never forsakes me, that, by his wounds I am healed, and I am locked in and chosen and nothing's ever going to change that. And so no, that looks great to me, Scott. It's just, I mean, even as you're talking about it, and it feels like my soul is already feeling refreshed. So love it, man.
Well, we just have to remind this to each other, because we will default to the norm, and the American norm is I'm going to default to work. And and now we're not anti-work. So those of you that are listening on the podcast, we have on the left-hand side these words: rest, abide, being, and covenant, and that's all about relationship. And so in between there, we've got this little semicircle. And in the semicircle on the far right, we have the other words, and Jesus loves these words too. Mm-hmm. So on the right hand of the column that we have on the right, what we're looking at is we rest on the covenant relationship side, but on the work side, what we're doing is we're being responsible.
Yeah.
And not just responsible, but in our own work, what we're trying to do is to say, hey, God has given me assignments in life to do. I want to do those assignments. I want to do them well. Yeah. And so when we go back to the family and, family and, hey, I'm doing both, and I'm on a one of those big trapeze trying to hang on both sides with a big pole. And then when we're stepping in both of these places, the family and is both. It's both and. Family or is okay. Well, family or is I'm choosing one over the other, like a toggle switch, and that's tough. But when we get to family on mission, now we're talking about the family as my church, the family as being a part of God's family, and the family that I lead out in my home. All three of those things are the important things that we do. And so all of this is important. So on the right hand of the side, we have where rest was, we have work on the opposite side. And where abide is on the right side, we bear fruit. Jesus wants us to bear fruit. So he's not asking us to sit around and sleep and just do fun stuff all the time. He's asking us to engage in his corporate mission. When we see being on the left-hand side, what we have is doing on the right-hand side, because God does want you to do things. And we'll give you a flip phrase in just a minute that'll help you with this. And when we have covenant on the bottom of the rest side, we have kingdom on the bottom of the work side. And so the challenge that we have is we're in a relationship and we have responsibility, but what we want to live into is fullness. And how do we live into fullness? So this is just a phrase that will help you remember is, hey, ultimately, do we rest from our work, or do we work from our rest? And it's just really clear with Genesis 1. It's really clear with John 15 that where we start is we want to work from a place of rest. And the reason that's so important is because if people see Christians as overworked, and sometimes overwork is our own problem. Like, hey, everybody asks me in the world to do all these types of things, and I need to learn to say that simple 2-letter word, no. I can't do everything. I would love to do everything, but I can't do everything. And so as a result of that, when people are asking you to do things, you really need to give yourself like, hey, let me look at my life. I have a family. I have a wife. I have 4 kids. I have hobbies that we do together. And I want to do those really, really well. And so we have hobbies. And so there are things we want to do together. We want to have a life.
Yeah.
Christians are people who need to get up and find their life and say, what are the things that really matter? I can't do it all. I just can't do it all. And so what I want you to adopt is that mentality is I don't rest from my work. I work from my rest. That is God's orientation. He wants us to be able to say, you know what? I created a world where it was evening before it was morning. I called people into ministry, and I put them on the sidelines for a season so that they could get ready for the work. And so I'm going to try to do this best I can on video with people listening to the podcast. But Mitch, we're just going to use you as an example, just for a second. So in this semicircle that we have, I've got a plumb line that's coming straight from the top to the bottom. And if we were perfectly balanced in rest and work, that would be the best place for us to be. However, if we were just to look at our day, just our normal, everyday, normal day, work day, would you say that you lean more on your work days toward rest, or would you say you work on your work days more toward work? And as a habit, as a trend, what takes priority for you most of the time? And so if we don't start at zero, because I assume, Mitch, you wouldn't say that you're perfectly balanced on zero down here at the bottom, right?
No, not at all.
Okay. All right. So if that's true for you, which way do you lean?
Definitely towards work. Even as I read Bear Fruit, doing Kingdom, that all to me is one, that all that stuff like piques my interest. Like, I want to bear fruit. I want a kingdom. So let me lean this way. And the only way I knew how to do any of that is just be very active. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I'd say I'm at least, probably at the very least conservative 50% of my way up on that U there. So
okay, so that was this exercise, so you know how that works. So what you're saying is, on a norm, I'm somewhere around 50% toward work. And so that really, if we're looking at a full score, that means like you're about 75% leaning to work. And 25% leading to rest.
Yeah, for sure.
So with that as here's the way that you disciple people through moments like this. You say, are you happy with a 75-25 curve that's leaning toward work?
No, I'm not yet. For me, Scott, as I look at that, to become full, where I'm abiding and resting, that just seems really scary to me, because it seems like it's a little bit out of my control. That's my initial thought as I look at that. Like, am I willing to relinquish control to do that? That's and which is not a good thing, but I'm just trying to think of like, what's my initial response to that?
Yeah, well, when you think about 168 hours a week, like we pretty much give somewhere between, 8 hours a night. I don't think you get 8 hours a night. I don't think I get 8 hours a night either. But let's just say 6 times 10. That's 42 hours is basically sleep. Okay? Yeah, and then 40 hours it belongs to your boss, right? And usually it's not really 40, right? It's probably more than that.
Yeah.
And then you go home from work, and when you go home from work, this is the time where you energize, you take care of things, you rest well, you look at your family, and you do things with them, and you go after the things that give life to you. Like, I know it was crazy for me to say that it gives me life to have a really well mowed yard. But in ministry, every day that I do ministry, I don't go home with everything in order. So when I see something that's in order that I've done, I'm like, man,
that's pretty nice.
That actually gives me, a charge. When when I can come home and take my wife to a movie, and because I thought in advance, sometimes you work so hard that you just don't think in advance. And then your rest is kind of like that worn out thing instead of the rejuvenizing thing. And so that's what we want that to be for you. But I want to give you like the solution to all of this.
Yeah.
That Jesus was probably had the longest task list in the history of the world. Yeah. And so he figured out ways to do things, and he would go and pray to his Father before the sun came up, and his disciples would have to go find him. I mean, think about how smart Jesus was. He would separate himself with the disciples, and every morning they had to go find Jesus as the first act of their day while they were following him. And so let's go follow you, Jesus. And then he's talking about them and prayer, and Jesus is rejuvenated because he's spending time, he's abiding with his Father. Yeah. And the rest of us are just, hey, we're fishermen or farmers or tax collectors. We don't know what to do. But here's what I want to show you is that the goal in this semicircle being in between rest and work is for us to be able to say the maximum life that we can have is to be extreme. I'm going to kind of color this in here. We want to be extreme in being the most restful people in the history of the world. We want to max out resting. And again, remember, resting isn't just sleep. It's also all the things you enjoy in life that you're getting to do, and you're making space for yourself to do that. Yeah. Yeah. Now, when that's true, when you rest really well, then you have so much energy as you go to work that you're better at work because you rested. Yeah. And so what we're looking at is God isn't really saying, hey, which one's more important, rest or work? Yeah. What he's saying is there's one that fuels the other. And the one that fuels the other is finding rhythms in your life that allow you to rest so that you can do all the things that your bosses want you to do, that your family needs you to do. And even beyond that, the other things that you want to do. All of those things kind of mix together. And so what we're trying to say is when you work your tail off at work, you're ready to rest when you get home. Mm-hmm. And when you max out resting, then you have plenty of energy to go back to work. And it just comes back to that simple word, fullness. Yeah. Jesus wanted us to live life to its fullest. And so we can't do that if work is a master for us. Yeah. And I think Mitch, we've talked about this a couple of times. If you don't think about it daily and weekly and monthly, or at least quarterly, and then yearly, like when are you going to get away? Yeah. And what are you going to do? So daily, I want to encourage you guys to think, hey, how can I have a little bit of respite in the day? And when I'm looking at those words, like I try to make them alliterate, since it's like a pastor thing, you just got to get words that work. So I just say, have some simplicity set into your day, that it's just you. I drive a long way to the place that I work, and I use that time between me and Jesus. And we'll be singing in the car. It'll be horrible sounds, but we'll be singing in the car, and we'll be trying to rejuvenate. And then weekly, there's a Sabbath day for us to give ourselves to God and our family and the things that we love to do. And in Texas, that's watching the Cowboys, and so they're going to win the Super Bowl this year. I declare it.
I hope so, man.
And then on the quarterly or monthly, I really like it better monthly than quarterly. You need to find a staycation, sort of a thing to do that is away from the norm. You need to, because there's a norm at home, there's a norm at work, and you need to break the norm on a regular rhythm. And so you don't have to do that every month. It could just be like going to the next town over and finding a great restaurant, or it could be like going to a whole day full of movies and not leaving not leaving the theater.
Theater, yeah.
Yeah, it just depends on what
Yeah,
you love and what you like to do.
totally.
I love to run in the morning,
Yeah.
and when I get to do that, it's a,
Hmm.
it's a it's a rejuvenating thing for me. And then
Yeah.
yearly, you really need to think about your sabbatical. We would call those vacations probably,
Yeah.
but just to keep it in alliteration world, it's just simplicity, Sabbath, staycation, and sabbatical. And
Mm.
we need those types of little markers like, hey, have we done that this week or
Yeah.
this year
Yeah.
or this month? Have
Hmm.
have we done it? And if you don't calendar your rest first, you'll always sneak into leaning over into too much
Absolutely.
work.
Or somebody will put something on your calendar for you.
Yeah, that's
You
exactly right.
know?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
sometimes it's not your choice, you know.
Yeah. You know, Scott, one of the things that you told me a while back in this was, I mean, going back to Genesis 1, it says it was evening, then morning, evening, then morning, evening, morning. And really, when you think about light, I mean, you were forced to sleep. There is darkness. There's literally nothing you can do because you can't see. I even think a buddy of mine, this was probably 6 years ago, we went camping, and I don't know, I didn't think about it. We went in December in Arkansas. Well, it gets dark at like 5:30. I mean, it's like 5:30. We're sitting there like, what do we do for the rest of the night? We can't see anything, like I think we ended up going to bed at like 6:37 because we're like, there's nothing we can really do. And so for the majority of human history, there was a restful cycle to the day
Oh,
because you were
right.
forced to. And it was like when you think about it, what was it? I don't know when the light bulb was invented, but it hadn't been very long.
Right.
And now, especially I know with this next us and millennials and Generation Z that, we've got stuff that'll keep us up all night, totally keep us from rest, totally keep us from being distracted. And so rest is there. And I even love the way that Hebrews 4 puts it, where it says, hey, you need to work to get this. Like, don't be like the Israelites. They wandered and they rebelled. You need to work to enter the rest of God. Otherwise, you'll end up like them, kind of off on your own thing and under the discipline and judgment of God. And I've never forgotten that because I thought that's such a great, because that seems foreign to us, but for the majority of human history, there was forced rest upon humanity.
Yeah.
And now it's like that's totally, I mean, it's totally not, we just don't get that because we can stay up 24/7,
Yeah. I remember that article that that was talking about that, and they said that the light bulb and the watch were the two things that started to govern us versus, the natural elements, having us. You know what? There's not a whole lot we can do, and actually, it probably wouldn't be too safe for us to go out in the woods in the middle of the night
Yeah.
and encounter a bear.
Yeah.
And so God doesn't favor work or rest, but what he does, he wants the fuel
Yeah.
of rest to actually make the things that are on the work side
Mm-hmm.
doable and enjoyable.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen in a fallen world.
Yeah.
Genesis 3 happened, but the best we can do is to commit ourselves to, hey, I'm going to take care of me. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
mental health issues that people have, it's related to their sleep patterns, and
Yeah.
it's really important that we rest in that way, but also rest in the way of things that rejuvenate us.
Absolutely. And I think my encouragement to, anyone out there, millennial and Gen Z, wherever you're at is, make sure that things that you maybe you're labeling as rest, make sure those are really restful and don't leave you, tired, irritable, those kind of things. So just make sure that the things you're doing are actually replenishing your soul and your body and your mind and not taken away from that. Because you could be just vegging on your phone for a couple of hours, but that may not actually be restful to your mind and your soul,
Yeah.
So,
Too much screen time
mm-hmm.
is not healthy. And the other thing that I would echo that you're saying to us is we have choices to make, and we can passively make choices,
Mm-hmm.
or we can intentionally make choices. And so rest is one of those things that if you're not intentional about it and putting it on your calendar, like we said, and put your vacations there first, do everything you can to make sure that you're getting where you need to. And honestly, Mitch, I really believe that every pastor in America needs a sabbatical on a regular rhythm so that they can disengage with what has become very normal and routine for a season, so that they can come back in another way. And they're, college professors get that all the time. They get a whole year to go rethink what they're doing and how they're going to teach and what's going to be next. And I just think we need to pay attention to those things. And I know a lot of people would say, well, wait a minute, we're paying you to go have a sabbatical. Well, a sabbatical, if it makes you better, that's really good investment.
It's a great investment.
Yeah, it's a great investment. And I run into people all the time that feel like, sabbaticals are just another lazy young person way of, but it's not. I mean, it's in Scripture. I mean, if Jesus had 40 days by himself in the wilderness, there's something being said about sabbatical seasons and the value that they bring. Because as a pastor, if I could just speak from a pastor to pastors and for people in ministry, the reality of your job is that you don't just carry your own stuff, you carry a lot of other people's stuff, and that weights you down. And so that's why we want you to have daily, weekly, monthly, or quarterly and yearly sort of ticks in your mind. My wife and I, every time we go somewhere special, one of the things we do is before we leave, we decide what the next thing special we're going to go do together is. And it might be a year from now, or it might be 6 months from now, or 3 months from now. But what we do is we go ahead and plan, this was so life-giving to us in our marriage, and we need to remember this is important. So man, take care of your kids, take your daughters to daughter dates, and take your sons to ball games and all the kind of things that they would enjoy, and let them choose the activity, but you be present with them. Those are the things that give life, not just to you and your family. And I know you've heard me say this, Mitch, but people trust going into discipleship if they see that the senior leader is exuding just a vital life, because he has this rest work thing in place. And when they notice that your family also has a vital life, they're more likely to go on mission. So those two things are things that we don't need to just ignore. Those are really important things that they mined out in England about 15 years ago. And it's been a great study. So, man, I know I talk too much, but I really enjoy talking about this, because I want to see healthy people leading healthy people.
That's a good word, Scott. Well, I appreciate that, Scott, and man, just good stuff. Even as we're going through this again, I've got this illustration in multiple journals that I reference back to, but it's always a necessary reminder, because for me personally, I'm a person that works before rest, and I feel like, man, if I can work hard, God will love me more, and more will get done, and it's just a constant reminder. Even walking with Jesus for 12 years now, it's like I got a constant reminder, hey, he doesn't approve me because I work hard for him. He approves me just because he does, and that's it. And that abide, no movement. Hey, don't move on from me, I won't move on from you. That's when you bear fruit. It's, man, so good. So, Scott, thanks for jumping on today. Really appreciate your leadership and just your investment in next generation leaders and college leaders.
Man, thank you. And let me just say this. I had a friend who used to tell me, I'd rather burn out than rust out, but there's other options. You don't have to burn out or rust out.
Yeah, that's a good word.
Thank you, Mitch.
Good word. Yeah, thank you, Scott. Well, friends, thanks for joining us on the Roundup podcast today. Again, don't forget about Roundup 2022, May 11th through 13th in Fort Worth, Texas. You can register at sbtexas.com/Roundup. And also don't forget to follow us on social media at SBTC Collegiate, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's where all these podcast videos are being uploaded. So, friends, thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
See you.